to walk with God through adversity, you got to have spiritual vision. You got to be able to see with spiritual eyes, and to have spiritual vision, you got to see reality clearly. We know the world we live in, reality often becomes blurred. But as we walk with God, living in the real, in the moment, we got to stay in tune with reality. And of course, to see reality, we need the true light to see reality. We need Jesus Christ. We can't see reality without him. To see reality, we also need we need the truth. We talked last week that the fact that Jesus came from his Father, who is the truth. Jesus Christ himself is the truth. He came to tell the truth so that we might know the truth. And of course, the only way we can be free is to abide in him. And that's how we come to understand the truth. So the other thing we talked about, any questions you may have, I'm still getting my feet up under me with this Zoom and everything. If you'll put them in the chat, because we had a question up on last week, somebody had put in the chat. They said they really don't understand why they have to go through so much pain and suffering as a Christian. We're going to kind of address some of that today, because that is a question that some people have, some people struggle with. And so, Lord willing, this study will help bring more understanding to pain and suffering and adversity and trials that we have to go through. Okay, all right, we're back. So the world has created and promotes its own sense of what reality is. And we know there's all different types of philosophies and ideologies that people have created, and they live in those, they live in their own reality. But there's only one true reality, and that's through Jesus. We come to understand what it is. Hold on. Here we go. Paul in Romans chapter 12, we talked last week, Paul says, that's what, the reason Paul shared that with the Church of Rome is there was a lot of philosophies going on during his time. People had a lot of thoughts and they were living according to their own reality. But Paul tells us and reminds us, don't conform to the pattern of this world, but we got to be transformed by the renewing of our mind. The only way we renew our mind is in, of course, the word. With that in mind, Paul also said that the only way to stay in reality, to stay plugged into the truth and see the true light, we got to take captive every thought. And we get thousands of thoughts a day. Everybody does. But we got to make them all captive and take them captive and make them obedient through Jesus, to Jesus, because he is the truth. So all the thoughts we have, we weigh them against the truth and we throw away the garbage and we keep the truth. So to live in reality, we got to stay in the moment and be spiritually aware. Now, I touched upon this last week in terms of the ultimate goal of this class. Brother Smith.
James chapter 1, verse 2, my brethren, count it all joy when you fall into various trials, knowing that the testing of your faith produces patience, but let patience have its perfect work, that you may be perfect and complete, lacking nothing.
James says, count it joy when you have adversity, when you have trials, various types. Why is that, James? Well, there's a reason, because he talks about the testing in your face in the amplified version of that, James chapter 1, verse 2, he says, be assured that the testing of your faith through experience, life experience is the testing of your faith, produces endurance, leading you to spiritual maturity and inner peace. So how do we become spiritually mature? We got to handle the trials, adversities in our lives, whatever it may be. We got to be faithful unto the Lord, regardless of what comes our way. It doesn't really matter. So James, as we read that, as Brother Smith read that, James did not say if you have trials in life. He did not say that. He said when you have trials. When you have trials and adversity, what that says is it's guaranteed. It's guaranteed you're going to have some. You can't get around it. So this is a rhetorical question. You don't have to answer, but how many trials have you had in your life? Are you dealing with any trials right now? You got any adversity in your life you're dealing with right now at this very moment? You think you're going to have any in the future? Now, so when you think about, have you passed all of your past faith tests and trials? Because as James said, it's a testing of our faith. Have you passed all your trials, overcome all your adversity? God wants us to walk with him through any and all circumstances. So the ultimate goal of the class in James chapter 1, he says, be joyful. Count it all joy whenever you go through trials and adversity. So here's my question for everybody, another rhetorical question. Where is your joy level? Where are you at right now? When you have some adversity, some trouble in your life, where's your joy level? And the other question would be, how soon are you joyous? Are you joyous after the trial that you've been through adversity? Are you joyful in the middle of the trial? Are you joyful at the beginning of the trial, the trouble that comes in your life? And only you can answer that question. But with the help of the Lord, we can all increase our joy level. That's the goal of this class. How do we increase our joy level as we increase our understanding of trials and adversity? To be happy in the middle of a storm, a life storm. Easier said than done sometimes. I recognize that. But we got to be open and honest. We got to be real with ourselves to really assess where we are in our spiritual walk with the Lord. Because if I'm here just telling you what I think you want to hear, because I'm a member of the church, because I'm an elder, I'm a minister, I'm a deacon, I'm telling you what I think you want to hear, that's not being real. That's not being honest with myself. I'm not allowing myself to be vulnerable, because I can spin tales all day long, but the Lord knows the truth. I can lie to myself, to others, but I cannot lie to the Lord. So we gotta be real with ourselves also, if we want to grow and mature spiritually. So we're gonna study and work on building our spiritual maturity, where we can be joyful when we experience adversity of any kind. Well, I said earlier that trials and adversity are you're guaranteed to have them. Well, why is that? Well, Job, in Job 14, verse 1, he says, man who was born of woman is a few days and full of trouble. A few days and full of trouble. Again, I said that we're just guaranteed to have some adversity in life. No person is immune, whether it be evil forces that are coming up against you, because we are in a war, a spiritual war, whether it be trouble within the world. We know this past week there's some more trouble brewing in our culture here in America. But we all face exposure, and we're guaranteed to have it. Charles Stanley, in his book, Walking with God Through Adversity, talks about that, the fact that no person is immune to trouble within the world. And of course, he got that from Job, because that's what Job shared in chapter 14. Now, why is that, Brother Smith? What did Paul say in Romans 6?
Romans 6:18, and having been set free from sin, you became slaves of righteousness. I speak in human terms because of the weakness of your flesh. For just as you presented your members as slaves of uncleanness and of lawlessness, leading to more lawlessness. So now present your members as slaves of righteousness for holiness.
So here's what we know, that no person is immune to it, but the flesh by itself just don't stand a chance. At least I'll think back to when I was a slave to the flesh, weak in the flesh. I was faithful. I was a good slave. I was a good slave to sin. But when Jesus freed me, when I abided in his word and I became free through him, then now I'm presenting myself as a slave to righteousness. But in the flesh itself, you're going to struggle dealing.
Brother Wynn, you went silent.
I think we are suffering from the Zoom issue. He has frozen, trying to get a message to him at this point. But stay with us, texting him as we talk. I guess I could go into some of our Wednesday night study. We're dealing with same topic, but from two different computer issues, from two different angles. God uses us in ways that we sometimes don't understand. And as we go through struggles, we are going through those things not without God, but with God. And so being that and I'm going from thoughts and not from notes, being that we are his children, we are his sheep and his pasture, we should rejoice to think that God has that much faith in us that we can withstand the struggles, endure the pain, and come out on the other side more trusting and more faithful in his word. According to what Brother Wynn just sent me, his computer itself went down. So it may be a moment or two before we have him rejoin the session. Uh, Brother Smith put you on the spot here. What are your thoughts on the topic? Did we lose everyone?
I'm still on.
No, we're still here.
Okay. Just want to make sure that we didn't lose
We're still here.
everyone
Yeah.
in it.
Yeah, I'm here.
You know, sometimes
here.
we think of ourselves and our position in God's kingdom as the most prized possession. But think about it, Brother Banton. If someone was to buy a car from you, and it's not just the regular old 1950s Chevy, but they now purchase one of the newer, nicer cars in your inventory, and it may be a performance car. Wouldn't it behoove the purchaser to try to see how much power, how much endurance that particular vehicle has. And if in doing that, they are basically making the engine suffer a little more when you rev it beyond certain points and you're trying things out. But once you've done that, once you have proven that particular vehicle, then you know how much of a bargain or how valuable that thing is. But I heard of a person when I was out in Abilene. They had purchased one of the state of the art cars for the day. And they determined that they would not use that car, but they would put it on blocks and they would just preserve it for years and years and years. But in that, they gained no value from that particular vehicle. Now, if we are God's possessions, and he wants to see if we can endure, he has to put us through some trials and he has to put us out on the test track. And he has
Amen.
to sometimes see if what we think of ourselves is consistent with his will. I like to say sometimes that I wish I was as righteous as I think I am. But the
Mm.
only way that I can find that my righteousness is there is when I endure through the struggle and through the pain. And just like now, I'm hoping brothers Win to come back on to teach his lesson instead of the enduring through this. Brother Win, welcome back.
You're muted, Brother Wynn.
Yes.
Technology is something else, isn't it,
Oh,
brother?
Depends if you.
I love it when it works, but it's garbage when it doesn't. So give me a second here.
Well, Satan is a busy guy.
There's no doubt. No doubt. Coming back up slowly but surely. Rebooting. Everybody's been there, right? Everybody's been there. Okay. Right, give me 60 seconds and I hope to be back up. Let's see, screen two.
James, I just want to let folks know that while you are rebooting, prayer requests, I have prayer requests today. So if you have some prayer requests you want to send, just go ahead and send me a private chat and I will include those in this morning's prayer requests. I see your screen again, Brother Wayne. Is that a step in the right direction?
Yeah, we're trying to get there. Which one do you see?
Uh, I see your smiling face. So right now we're
Okay.
not presenting.
Are you seeing the, hold on.
We see your slides. Slides are up.
They are?
Yes, we see. Happy New Year in the Lord.
We see your presenter's view.
Okay, hold on. You see the presenters now?
Absolutely.
Okay.
The Happy New Year's 2021. So I
And
think
you're
that's
looking
your
at the
first slide.
You're looking at the presenter's view, you said?
No, we see the
Okay.
audience screen.
Woo, man. Well, so you said if I hit Alt and the tab, I can go to the.
Yes, you should be able to.
Well, Alt and the tab. it's not bringing it up. I may have to do it the hard way. Sorry about that. I'm gonna do it.
Okay.
uh,
Oh no, that was the click on the the button right below the screen to show all of the screens together.
I'm just gonna do it this way.
Okay.
Okay. I apologize. So we were talking about the joy level. Is that right?
We're a little past this.
Okay. All right. All right. Here's where we left off. So the world we live in now, we know it's full of challenges, right? We know that Jesus he knows all about the human condition. He lived it, he walked it. He has a full understanding of what we're going through, uh, Brother Smith.
Hebrews 4:15. For we do not have a high priest who cannot sympathize with our weaknesses, but was in all points tempted as we are, yet without sin.
So Jesus endured the full weight of suffering, the full weight. So he knows, and he sympathizes with our weaknesses that as we are going through challenges and adversity in our lives, and we fight and struggle to overcome some things. He's so familiar with it. So let's talk about the definitions of the trials, the temptations, adversity that we're going to be talking about this quarter. The Greek word, I'm not even going to try to pronounce them at this time, but both of them at times are translated to tempt, test, and trial. The trial, just so we're all on the same page, when we're talking about a trial is that precious situation that one must experience. You're being tried, you're being tested, you're being asked to prove something. And of course, a trial has an outcome. Adversity. In Hebrews 13:3 in the King James Version, Hebrew writer was referring to prisoners who had some tough times and being in prison. They were dealing with some hardship, misfortune, calamity, mishap, affliction, suffering. That's what adversity is. And then temptation, of course, a temptation is a difficult situation. It's a pressure that brings a reaction to prove, to try. Temptation can lead you wrong, and one's character is faced with choices. So those are the things we'll be talking about this quarter, the trials we deal with, the temptation we have to deal with, adversity that we have to deal with. And these are all things we look to overcome. But if we're walking with the Lord, if we're walking with God, he gives us the ability, the wisdom, the understanding to withstand any of these situations we'll be dealing with, regardless of the source. Regardless of the source of the adversity, God is able. So the problem, the issues that you're struggling with today, it could be one that's lingered for a long time. It could have been around. You might be dealing with this for years. You might be wondering if it ever will be resolved. Will life ever return to being normal because of some adversity or a trial you went through? But adversity and trials, like nothing else, has the ability to bring about solid, constructive change in your life. It can mature you spiritually. That test, that adversity, that trial you're dealing with, if you're leaning and trusting God, it can mature you and build your faith and strengthen you. But we have to allow God to bear our burdens, because if we do, Charles Stanley in his book talks about how the adversity can can bring you to a closer fellowship with the Lord when you allow him to bear your burdens. It can improve our relationship with him. So I want to challenge you and myself, because this lesson is for me. I'm just going to be honest with you. This is something I need. But I'm going to challenge myself. I'm going to challenge you to alter the way you view life's problems and trials. Instead of being in fear, uncertain when difficulties come, step out in faith and trust God to deal with your circumstances, developing a new attitude, raising your joy level towards that adversity and the problems and the troubles of life that you face. Raise your level of joy. Lord, you're putting me through this. You're allowing me to go through this. I'm faced with this because you love me. You're trying to get me somewhere. You're trying to mature me. You're trying to work with me. And I'm for that, Lord, I'm happy. So know that when your adversity or trials touch your life, God is at work. And he will bring you through that season of difficulty victoriously. Charles Stanley, in his book, Walking with God Through Adversity. That's a quote from him. He says, when God touches, just know that he's at work and he can bring you through that season of difficulty. So the winds of adversity, and they blow strong. They blow in every direction. They don't discriminate between rich and poor, weak and strong, black or white. People may try desperately to avoid difficulty and hardship. Nobody wants to invite it in their lives. And we work hard to avoid it. But sooner or later, adversity will strike our lives. Sooner or later, because no one is exempt from sorrow, heartache, disappointment, and even sudden tragedy. No one is exempt. That's something that we may run from, but sooner or later, it will show up. So any adversity, temptations, or trials that one faces really is not evil in itself. They're closely linked together, but it's not evil in itself. The bottom line is, if any evil comes from any adversity that you face, it's based on how you react to it. It's based on your reaction to your circumstances. So when you're in the middle of whatever that trouble is, what is your reaction? Because God, of course, allows us to choose how we react. So the circumstances can be used or designed to display genuineness of the person's faith in that situation and make that person stronger. So when we hear of a tragedy, tornado going on, a fire, burned a building up, an earthquake, floods, homelessness, a serial killer, cancer, automobile fatality, famine, murder. When we hear about those tragedies, sometimes within ourselves, there's a deep-seated psychological defense mechanism that goes to work. Tim Keller talked about this in his book, Walking with God. It's just a deep-seated mechanism sometimes when we hear about it, and a defense mechanism goes into work. Well, what do you mean, Brother Wynn? Well, we may think to ourselves that such things happen to other people. That happens to somebody else. It happens to the rich, or it happens to the poor, or it happens to the careless people who don't take precautions, people who are poor planners. Maybe we even think, oh, those are sinners. That's why those tragedies happen to those people. Sometimes that goes into our mind. We may have thoughts like that. We may even tell ourselves that, man, if we only get the right people in political offices, if we only get our social systems right, we can take care of all injustice and nothing like this will ever happen again. Everybody can live happily ever after, like a Hollywood movie. That's just not reality. That's just not living in the real. Because Ernest Becker, in his book, he says, such thinking, when a person thinks like that, they fail to take the reality of life seriously or to admit the lived truth of the terror within creation, the panic lying beneath. The panic lying beneath the terror within creation. What was he talking about? Well, he was actually talking about the panic that comes from death. Death is beyond a doubt, unpredictable, and it is in our future unless Christ comes back. It's unpredictable, but that's something we're all going to face unless Christ comes back between now and your appointment with death. So in the flesh, we're always looking to make some sort of sense out of death in the flesh. I'm talking about the fleshly man now. In order to keep it safely at bay, we say, when we hear that tragedy, that adversity, I just shared all those different things, our mind may say, well, hey, I don't fit the profile. I don't live in that state where that happened. I never would have gone to that place where that person went, where they had some adversity. Besides, my house is not going to burn down. I got fire alarms. Oh, my house can't get burglarized. I have a burglar alarm. I take care of my body. I exercise. I eat right. I wouldn't have had a heart attack. We may think that somehow we can escape trouble. But, and Tim Keller fleshes out this thought in Walking with God Through Pain and Suffering. But here's what Tim Keller references. What happens when all the precautions you take do not work? You've got all this protection that, you know, we've been led to believe will keep us safe, keep us away from trouble, keep us away from adversity. But what happens when all the precautions you take don't work? Now what? His thought is the reality of life will meet you right where you live, suddenly, without warning. We don't get notice necessarily when adversity is coming, when trouble is coming. You don't get an email, a text, something in the mail. Nobody calls you necessarily. But when it happens without warning, what do? Well, Brother Smith, let's go to Psalms, 23rd Psalm.
Psalm 23:1, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me to lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He leads me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me.
So when Tim Keller asked that question in his book, he says it's in that valley, the valley of the shadow. It's a deep valley. It's dark. It's scary, but we all must walk through it. As David was talking about walking through that valley of the shadow of death, we all must walk through it. It's in that valley where life happens. Life is happening in that valley, and as a sheep walking through life, we're vulnerable to the enemy without a shepherd. So the valley of the shadow of death can refer to any distressing time in our lives. The awareness of our own mortality often comes with sickness, with serious trials, adversity, and hardships. But the Lord, our protector, can lead us through these dark and difficult valleys to eternal life with him. There's really no need to fear death's power. Why is that, Brother Wynn? Well, the shadow of death will not hurt you. There's no substantial evil in the shadow. The shadow of a serpent can't bite you. It won't sting you. The shadow of a gun or a sword will not kill you. So even though that valley is scary, it's deep, it's dark, those shadows, we can't allow the shadows to scare us. So during this quarter, we're going to talk about, study, and pray about walking through the shadows of death, these trials and adversity, because just like the shadow of death will not kill you, the shadows of the trials and adversity of life will not kill you. Now, we know that there's some trouble we face, that we were near death. We thought we were near death, but we're here, so it didn't kill you. If you, but you went through that adversity, you went through that trouble, you went through that trial for a reason. So the shadows can serve as a warning to get our attention. That we need to make some changes in our lives. So the shadows of death, the shadows of trials and tribulations have a way of saying, you need to rethink what you're doing. You need to rethink your lifestyle. You might need to make some changes in your life. But the valley can be fruitful. That valley that we walk through can be fruitful along with life's trials and adversity we face, because even death itself is fruitful and a comfort to the children of God. So the shadow of death, our inevitable death, sometimes dominates that psalm as we read it. Sometimes we know that psalm has been read at a lot of funerals. Is that right? A lot of funerals, they read the 23rd Psalm. But that 23rd Psalm is for the living. Because as scary, as deep, as dark as that valley is, if the Lord is your shepherd, he will lead you. That's why the shepherd is there, to lead you. David said, he leads me beside the still waters. He's restoring my soul. He's rejuvenating me. He's encouraging me. He's strengthening me throughout this valley. He leads me in the path of righteousness. If I'm following the shepherd as a sheep, that according to obeying the will of the shepherd, obeying the word of God, then for his name's sake, then he can protect me. He will protect me. He will guide me. He will lead me. So the question is, how do we walk consistently with the shepherd through our trials and adversity? Because they are coming. As I said earlier, there's no avoiding adversity. It's on its way to us all. So within that valley, that same valley we're walking in, where hope runs eternal. Our hope runs eternal in that valley of the shadow of death. Brother Smith.
Psalm 23, 5 and 6. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup runs over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
So forever, that's where our hope lies. As we walk with the shepherd through the valley of adversity, through the valley of trials, our hope lies in living with him, dwelling in the house of the Lord forever. So we just got to keep our eyes focused on the Lord, on the shepherd, and follow him. Because as he's leading us, he's going to lead us to righteousness. He's going to lead us to eternal life with him. So we must be very careful not to allow the troubles of life that Job talked about, that life is full of trouble. We can't allow it to serve as a roadblock, to detour us from our ultimate goal, is to live in the house of the Lord forever. But if you think about it, the postponing our own death is one of the favorite national pastimes. This is Tim Keller talked about that in his book, Walking with God Through Pain and Suffering. Postponing our own death is one of our national pastimes. Well, what are you talking about, Brother Wayne? Well, man, I got to get my exercising in. I got to stay physically fit, healthy. I got to check my cholesterol or have a mammogram, a PSA test. I got to install a burglar alarm, a fire alarm. I got to build a bunker. I got to wear a seatbelt. I got to wear a mask, get my COVID vaccine. We're always hedging against our own mortality, trying to postpone it. But what we find out, what the profile is, and we identify ways in which we don't fit in that profile. We take precautions. But however, despite our best intentions, death, life's trials, adversity is absolutely coming. It's absolutely coming. And sometimes it comes suddenly. So we got to be prepared and equipped to make sure we handle that, that we're able to handle that adversity, that trouble, in the way the Lord would have us to. So that we're going to be talking about that, because no matter what precautions we take, no matter how well we put together a good life, no matter how hard we have worked to be healthy, wealthy, comfortable with friends and family, and successful with our career, something will inevitably change it, ruin it. No amount of money, power, planning can prevent death, dire illness, relationship betrayals, financial disaster, or a host of other trials and troubles and adversity from entering your life. Human life is fragile and it's just subject to forces beyond our power to manage. Life happens. We all seen that phrase, and life happens. So as it's happening, just understanding, as we increase our understanding of the source of adversity and trials, as we understand it better, we can accept it better, deal with it better, trust the Lord, because we know it's coming. We live in a fallen world. And in this fallen world we live in, God has promised some adversity and trials to humankind as we live. As we live everyday life, God has promised some things. So when we talk about sources of adversity, just living in a fallen world, we're going to have some adversity. God himself allows some adversity. We're going to talk about that. Our personal sin creates adversity and trials for us. I can testify to that. I'm sure if I had some time for testimony, people can share some personal sins, some choices they made that created adversity for themselves, self-inflicted. Also, the sins of others creates adversity and trials for us. So we spend a good portion of our life dealing with the adversity and the trials that other people's sin has created for us. And of course, we know the adversary himself creates trials for us. So those are the sources of adversity, and we're going to kind of flesh those out, because I really want to make sure that we're plugged in and in tune to where the adversity comes from, why it's happening, and how we can best deal with it, overcome it, and understand it. We don't have to like it, but the sins of somebody else, we don't have to like their sin, but guess what? Sometimes we still got to deal with it. Now, we know that Adam and Eve lived in the Garden of Eden. We're certain why they had to leave. We know they lived there. They lived the best life ever. Until what? They had to leave. Why'd they have to leave? Well, they sinned, trespassed against the will of God. So after they disobeyed God by eating of the forbidden fruit, everything changed. Everything changed. It was disobedience to God's will, sin. Sin always has consequences, always does. There's just no getting around it. Adam and Eve, their lives were free of adversity. There was no sickness, no death, no decay, suffering of any kind in the Garden of Eden. There was no tension in their relationship with each other. There was no conflict between them and the environment they lived in the garden. They could have not wished for anything more as they lived in that garden. But after they had disobeyed God by eating of the forbidden fruit, everything changed. Life as they once knew it disappeared. There were consequences to the life choices they made to disobey God and sin. So why does adversity and trials exist? The fallen world we live in through Adam and Eve disobeying the will of God, brought some sin upon us. So this is a question that I thought about, and you can just raise your hand. Raise your hand if you think you could have or would have done a better job in the garden than Adam and Eve. Raise your hand. The screen I have, I can't. Do we have any hands raised? Because go ahead and come off mute if you could have done a better job. Let me know who you are, please, because I need to meet you. If you think you could have done a better job, because we know that the consequences of their choices, life choices, those are things we're dealing with today. So we're just talking about the causes of adversity. God gave to humankind free will. When God created animals, of course, he programmed them with instincts that they obey him without questioning him. When God created human beings, he gave them intellect that contained free will, the ability to think, choose, question, make decisions, make choices. That freedom, this freedom that God gave us, included the ability to choose love or hate, good or evil, trespass, sin, or obedience. That's what free will is all about, the ability to choose, of course. But human freedom allows us to make choices as we navigate our way through life, but God included consequences with the various choices we make. If there were no real choices to make, then free will would not exist. We'd be like the animals. We would have instincts programmed to obey the instincts. There's no choices to make. There's no thinking to be done. There's no reasoning or reasoning that a person would make in their intellect if we were like the animals. But we have free will. And it's the will of God that establishes, of course, right versus wrong. He is the plumb line. It's his will that tells us right from wrong. Brother Smith, go ahead, Genesis chapter 2.
Genesis 2:16, and the Lord commanded the man, saying, of every tree of the garden you may freely eat, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it, you shall surely die.
Hold on one second. Okay. In Romans 7, Paul said that if it had not been for the law, I would not have recognized sin. Just as because the law showed what sin is. Just as God commanded man in the garden, he told man what his will was, that they can eat freely, but the tree of knowledge and good and evil you shall not eat. Just as God brought the law to Israel, the law told them specifically what the will of God was, what sin was, what trespassing was. So how was the temptation trap set in the Garden of Eden? Well, we know that in the Garden of Eden, the temptation trap was set by the father of lies, was set by Satan. Satan set in place his own winning formula in the garden, and it's been working ever since. So what he set up in the garden, he's still using today. He'll use it today. 1 John 2:15, Brother Smith, 16.
Do not love the world or the things in the world. If anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life is not of the Father, but is of this world.
So as John talked about in 1 John, what things of the world are, the lust of the flesh, lust of the eyes, the pride of life. It's the same formula that he had employed in the garden. And he's been working that formula ever since. So we talk about the sources of adversity. When Adam and Eve allowed themselves to fall prey to the trap, to the of the enemy, of the adversary, when they fell prey to it, their flesh lusted after the tree. Their eyes, Eve said, oh, it looks good for eating. And of course, Satan told them how wise they would be. They would know the difference between good and evil. So the pride that, man, I'll know what God knows. So that winning formula, that basic winning formula is still in place today. And that was the beginning of our adversity, the fall of mankind in the Garden of Eden. So next week we'll continue with this lesson. I apologize about the technology, but next week we'll continue and kind of flesh out the sources of adversity. We know the fall of mankind was one. We're going to talk about how God allows some adversity. We'll talk about how we create our own adversity, how the sins of others create adversity for us. And of course, we'll talk about the adversary creating adversity. But we just got to be well aware, informed, and be able to recognize it and call it what it is. Because as I said earlier, or as Job said earlier, man's is of a few days, but life was full of trouble. So Lord, help me to deal with the adversity and the trouble that's before me. So I'm going to share, this is for next week. These some of the scriptures are homework for next week. I'll put this in the chat also, so you can read those scriptures. And for next week, we'll cover some of the further sources of adversity. So I believe we're